Today's episode is brought to you by CarPhonix. Kind of lame, right? Today's episode really is about factory or not. And that kind of means, is it factory installed? Does it look like it's factory installed? And, you know, what can the installer do to make it, as factory-like as possible? So this is one of my dealer contracts from Volkswagen here in London. They contacted me. They said, hey, we get a bunch of used cars in our inventory that don't have Bluetooth, and we need a solution because our factory radios will give them Bluetooth but not allow them to retain steering wheel controls for volume up and down. So one thing that we did, we just kind of gave them a basic radio and said, what we'll do is we'll get you the radio and we'll be able to retain your steering wheel controls. And part of the modules here, so we have a CAN bus module here, which allows us to get switched power to turn on and off the aftermarket radio. And that works through a CAN high, CAN low system, as well as enables us to retain the steering wheel controls with the steering wheel control module, which will plug in to this module here once we've wired it. There's a dash kit, an antenna adapter, which makes it all kind of seamless. And by seamless I mean, if eventually the customer decides, hey, either I want to upgrade or put the factory radio back in the vehicle, it's just a matter of unplugging what we've done and plugging in the factory radio. I've already removed the radio out of this vehicle here, and it's just basically an empty hole, as you can see here. We have the wiring harness there and the antenna adapter. So the next step here is to install all this stuff into the car. But factory or not, what do you guys think? Is that a factory harness, or is that an aftermarket harness that will allow us to plug in this aftermarket radio? Well, I'll give you a hint. I did make it, but there's a few extra things that we do here to kind of, make it better and, allow us to have longevity in the reliability of the aftermarket system. So a few things here, it's wrapped in Tessa tape, which is kind of a factory type material tape, which is right here. I can show you that. Stuff isn't cheap, but it even says Tessa right there on it, Tessa tape. It's like a fabric. It's kind of like a, kind of like a cotton shirt with a sticky backing on it. And, it gets rid of any type of metallic-y sounds that may occur behind the dash once this is installed. The antenna adapter here has been wrapped in some sound deadening type foam. So once it's behind the dash, it's not going to hit anything and make any type of noise. As well as the modules. So we have our steering wheel control module here, and then we have the CAN bus module here, and in between the two we have some sound deadening type foam, which will just stop these two modules from kind of clinking around back behind the dash as well. So once I've pre-wired this harness behind the dash and plugged it into the car, it looks pretty factory. This will plug into the radio. This plugs into the factory side. Factory antenna adapter is here. It's kind of an oddball looking antenna adapter. It's kind of like a dual EU10 type Volkswagen adapter, AM and FM, as you can see there. The next step is to install our Bluetooth mic. And once I do all that and install the harness behind the dash, I'll come back with you and we'll bolt the radio in and give it a test run and put it all back together for our customer. And that'll be that. So if you just bear with me here a minute or so, I'll stick this radio into this car and I'll get back at you. Alright, so once I've installed the harnesses, which I'll show you now, I'll bring the radio into the car. The next step is to install the radio. And this is kind of a simple process, but part of how you jam the harnesses behind the dash there is going to determine again if you have any rattling or kind of metallic-y sounds going on in behind the dash, which is why kind of doing up the harnesses the way that we have them done here will help eliminate that. So I will plug in the radio. I've already mounted the Bluetooth mic here, which is just above the mirror, kind of pointed in a small direction toward the driver. He's got his steering wheel controls here. So once we've plugged in the radio, we can go ahead and start programming steering wheel controls, which I will show you right now. gonna set the phone down for a second, plug in our harnesses, and verify our connections. Our Bluetooth mic now goes in. Okay, here's the radio. And I got a set of keys here. So what we'll do now is we'll put the keys into the ignition and we'll just flip this module over. We're looking for the red and green indicating lights to help guide us through the programming procedure. So I'll set the key into the ignition, turn it on. You'll notice that we'll have a red flashing light here. See if we have any radio power, which we don't. And all of a sudden we do. And now we're getting the red and green flashing lights. We'll go ahead and just hold or tap the volume up button. And the lights will go through kind of like a blinking between red and green procedure here. There we go. Green indicates the radio type, and red indicates the volume type. It's flashing back and forth, which means we have to reset the module here. So give me 1 second here. Okay, so we've reset our module, and we're just waiting for it to go through its flashing procedure. I have my finger on the volume up button, and I'm holding it solidly, waiting for the lights to confirm. And we now have functionality. So the next step that I'll take, and I was just holding this button up here, right here on the steering wheel control, but I was holding it as I was waiting for the procedure to verify. So now we've got the radio in hand, and we are just going to go ahead and test all of our functionality. So our volume up and down, our track left and right, all that fun stuff before we bolt it into the dash. I guess it's kind of a bit hard to see with this protective film on there. I generally like to just to kind of leave it on there, and I'm going to leave it on there now because it's kind of nice for the customer to be able to, you know, remove that. It's like, I don't know, one of those things, unboxing thing that people seem to like. So anyways, we're going to test our volume up and down here. So we have volume here. Okay, so volume down is working. And then we're going to change tracks, which will be our radio stations, and that seems to be working just fine. We have a telephone button here. If we press and hold that, that will mute it. And a telephone call comes in, and then we have a, I think this is a voice command button here. Press that, and if the phone was connected, that would go to our voice command. So everything seems to be working, and the next step is to bolt it into the dash. Alright, so the radio has been installed into the dash, all bolted in. The harnesses have been strategically placed behind the radio housing to avoid any type of metallic clinging or clanking that you may hear and then maybe associate with something else that's wrong in the vehicle. Again, that's why it's so important to factory wrap all of our harnesses and make it look as good as possible. For just this one reason. So I've programmed steering wheel controls. Everything seems to be working the way it should be. The next step was to set the date, set the time, set the colors so it can match the rest of the lights on the dash. And we'll go ahead and press this here. English, yes. Demo off, yes. Okay, so what we've done here is we've already set the time. And for some reason, the date has reverted back on these Kenwoods. You actually have to set up in the clock here, because there's a clock adjust or clock or date sync, time sync, to turn that off and then set your time. For some reason, what the time sync does is it will take the date and time from the radio frequency bands, and around here that doesn't really work all that well. So we'll just set the clock here, clock adjust, and it's 12:57 in the afternoon. again, all part of the procedures that we go through to make sure the customer has a seamless installation done. So we'll just verify all of our steering wheel controls now. Getting volume up. Okay, we have volume down, and track right, that seems to be working, and then track left, that seems to be working as well. So I just wanted to thank you guys for watching and kind of listening to my blabbering on about factory or not. And it's important, to install harnesses correctly into vehicles and wire them correctly, whether it's a dealership job or not, or any one of your guys' cars. I just want to make sure that every time we do something here at our store that it's done 100%. And we're not the cheapest place in town. There's only a couple of guys here in town doing it anyways. But we do things a certain way that will surpass a lot of other installers' techniques. And you may be paying a little more, and we're talking a 5% margin more than our competition. But when a roll of tested tape costs $10 a roll, and I will generally use on a remote starter, I would use almost a whole roll wrapping up all the harnessing on a remote starter. I'll use a quarter of a roll wrapping up the harnesses on car audio jobs, or if I'm doing a full system in a vehicle with speakers and a deck and sub and amp, and we're wrapping up a set of RCAs, let's say over here, with tested tape along with our remote wire, you'll generally use a whole roll. So those are small little shop material type things, aside from our heat shrink or our hockey tape or foam that a lot of other shops just straight up don't use. So anyhow, thanks for watching, and catch you on the next one. Have a great day.